Hey everybody, it's Bridget Murphy, co-founder and CEO of Koru K9 Dog Training, back with you today again with my co-host, my husband Ray, and our trainer Ashley Nunez out of Oregon. I am really excited. We're going to be discussing a client success story today of a dog named Finley. Ashley knocked this one out of the park, and there's some really important points in Finley's training journey that we wanted to share with you. So I'm going to kick it over to Ashley so she can introduce herself to you, and we're going to dive right in. So take it from here, Ashley.
Hello. So I'm obviously Ashley. I've been training for about 7-8 years now. Originally got started with service dogs, and then I went to Tar Heel's 6-month program, working with police and military dogs, personal protection dogs, and behavior modification within the pet program. After there, that's where I really branched out. Originally got started because I had a dog who, my first dog as an adult, was awful. And I didn't really understand what I thought I knew everything. I did all the research on Google and YouTube University, and awful dog. Stressed me out every day. I did not understand why people had pets. And then once I started making those breakthroughs and like getting training on the other side, I was like, oh my gosh, wow, you don't annoy me every day. I love this. And that feeling was something that I wanted to pass along to other people who are just feeling so frustrated, at their wits' end. And that's not how dog ownership should be. It should be a partnership. You should be in love with your dog and have fun with them every day. And that's something that I wanted to pass along and what really motivated me to get into dog training. And then after Tar Heel is when I started to really break into like the behavior modification side, working with reactivity, aggression, fearful dogs. That was, in my early stages, very foreign to me, and I had no idea what was going on. But now that is something I really enjoy working with.
I love that you have that background. It's similar to Ray and I. That's how we got into dog training, because we had this dog that we're like, what the hell do we do with Luna, right? What kind of dog was your first dog again?
She was a Shiba Inu. So I was the dog person that I didn't research genetics or breed standards. I was like, this dog's cute. I want a cute dog. And then I didn't understand why she acted the way she did. Super aloof, very cat-like, per the breed standard. And so I was trying to fit that square into the circle hole. And I was like, what is going on here?
That right there should be another talk that we do at some point in time, because I think that's a very common thing that dog owners do, is get the cute dog, maybe not the one that matches the lifestyle. But let's talk a little bit about Finley. So Finley was a 1.5-year-old golden retriever that came to you for a 4-week program. Is that right?
Yeah, so she was actually a golden retriever Irish setter mix. Some very high energy working dogs in there. I remember the first time I ever took her on a walk, birds, immediate trigger. And she wasn't super big, but it was one of those things where she saw a bird and I was like, ooh, my shoulder is going to pop out of socket from her trying to go after them.
So, oops, sorry, I got myself on mute. So Ashley, really quick, I mean, I know we haven't even gone into Finley's stories yet, and you've already alluded to it with your own dog, and this dog. How many times have you seen, just in the time you've been training, that people have kind of underestimated the genetic background and the importance of it? I guess when you adopt a dog from like a rescue organization, you don't necessarily know anything about their bloodlines or anything about them. But how important is it to understand, even if it's like a small percentage of a certain breed mixed in there, is it to in your decision making, and is this the right dog for me?
I think it's super important. And I think that is one struggle, especially when looking at rescues, when they're listing, this is a lab mix. And you look at it and, as a professional, you're like, that's not a lab mix. There's something else going on in there. Because like you said, like even a small percentage, those genetics could shine through, or they might not. But that is something where, whenever I do an introduction phone call with people, I'm like, why did you get this breed? Like, what do you know about this breed? How many times have I gotten an American Pit Bull Terrier? I want to take it to the dog park, but he is aggressive. Well, genetically, a lot of them are prone to dog aggression. Or I have a Great Pyrenees and I live in a studio apartment in downtown Seattle. Okay, so, what breed outlet is it getting? Breed specific outlet. How many Malinois, German Shepherds? Oh, they want to bite everything. okay, so like let's look at getting that, they might not be the best sport dog or personal protection dog candidate. There might be some nerves we're working with, not able to handle pressure or anything like that. But like, let's get a tug. Let's, look into getting a spring pole, something to fulfill those requirements. And then a lot of the time, the other behaviors, the problem behaviors on the other side, they start to kind of just fall in line naturally.
Yeah, so genetics, I mean, we can't overcome genetics. Okay, we're not magicians. We don't do that. But what we end up doing is we end up teaching people how to manage the dog they have, which means a large lifestyle changes on their part. It's not just a matter of exercise, but if it's kind of entertaining the brain and satiating some of the things that genetically those dogs are prone to want to do. Malinois and Shuppers, they like to bite and tug and do those things. You've got dogs that want to chase things. If you're not giving them that type of lifestyle, you're going to get some kind of blowback on what you're forcing. Again, you started talking about the square peg in the round hole. A lot of people are talking about that when they get these dogs and they're trying to force them into an environment like being calm at a coffee shop when there's 15 other little white poodles walking by and the dog's reactive. So I guess it's a really tough conversation to have with some owners that, are already emotionally invested to the dog that they brought home, to tell them that they have to modify their expectation of what they're going to do with this dog and then how they're going to live with them. I mean, have you had those conversations?
Oh, all the time. Especially when I was doing service dogs, how many people would have, a husky mix that was super stubborn, independent, um, you know, or just, like really fearful, nervous dogs. These aren't dogs that want to go into public. If your dog needs a service dog for itself or an emotional support animal for itself, like it might not, be the best candidate for you. A lot of people, especially, working in these bigger cities like Portland, Seattle, they want their dog to be a go everywhere dog. And I understand that. And like, I relate, like, I want to take my dog places too. But you also have to ask, like, does your dog even want to be there? Like, are they having fun or are they just stressed out and shut down the whole time?
Yeah. So I know we got a little sideways in the weeds here, but you started mentioning some really important points. That's why I wanted to make sure we covered that. But let's go ahead and go into Finley and go into a little bit about what he was sent to you for, and then the challenges you came up against, I guess the expectations of the owners, and then I guess the training plan that ultimately kind of turned him around.
Yeah, so I mean, she just was a very rambunctious puppy. You could definitely see kind of both of those breeds coming together. And, again, I asked them, I was like, what do you know about these breeds? Like, why did you get this dog? And they've had family members with golden retrievers who are great family dogs, and that's kind of what they were looking for. They go backpacking a lot, so they wanted, that activeness. But at the same time, couldn't even get her out the door. She was already pooling. She wanted to bark at everything. And not out of aggression, just, a little bit of that frustration of like, I want to go greet you. I want to go say hi or just do something. But now I'm being held back, which just turned into barking, lunging, just kind of out of control behaviors. And they had an older dog, some poodle mix who, just one of those dogs that come out of the womb and they're fine and you don't really have to do much with, like they're just chill. So then they get this rambunctious puppy and they're like, ooh, we are in a little bit over our heads. Initially, we started with a 3-week program. And she was making a lot of great progress there, but they were actually on vacation, so they extended it a week, which is great because, with one of their goals being they wanted to take her hiking, but she couldn't pass by other hikers, she couldn't pass by other dogs. That allowed me then to go hiking with her and we could go out on trails and really work on trail manners, yielding to other people, having her just, especially down really steep hills, I would send her down on the e-collar, have her sit and wait until, I scurry down. I'm not the most athletic, so probably not the best trainer for hiking goals, but, just really being able to get her out into the world to set those expectations. But as far as ownership and setting, like, talking to the owners about how to change their lifestyle, I would say that they were one of the greatest clients I've had in terms of being open to making lifestyle changes. Sometimes people can get a little stubborn and stuck in their ways, and I don't ever hold that against someone. But I think one part of training that is often glanced over is yes, your dog is getting trained, but you also on the tail end have to make a lot of changes yourself and be prepared for that.
Yeah, agreed. That's one thing that we're really working on, promoting more owner education. It's, we can train dogs all day long, but truly, ultimately, it's the owner that needs to incorporate that training back into their home environment for the dog to be successful. So with Finley, had she had any training prior, or were they just got lucky with the other dogs, so they got Finley and it was like, we're just gonna do the things. Yeah.
Yeah, more of the latter there. She hadn't had any previous training, which honestly I kind of prefer. I like having just a blank state, kind of seeing how the dog is naturally without, maybe they did a really heavy-handed e-collar course. And now what I'm looking at is just a little bit of like shut down behaviors, but not necessarily how they are actually as a dog.
Yeah, totally. I agree with you. The blank slate, sometimes we're not having to undo undo some things. So with the I love that you did the hiking, and I actually think it's great. You mentioned that you're not like a big avid hiker. She had to utilize more impulse control, so that's almost that's almost even better. What other things did you do? Let me back up. The reason I'm asking this question is quite often we'll work on things that may not directly be the behavior, but it will assist with training the behavior. So did you do anything with impulse control to get the leash pulling and then hiking behaviors just solidified even more?
One thing that I like to do is I'll have the dogs in my house and I'll have them on leash mostly so they just can't wander away. And I'll sit there and I won't tell them anything. And they'll start to pace. A lot of them will start to whine because they're so used to constant stimulation and their brain just go, 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 go. Especially with dogs, that go to doggy daycare and dog parks all the time. They're not used to ever just settling. So they start to get a little frantic and they're like, what do I do? What do I do? Tell me, tell me. And I'll just sit there and ignore them. And then finally, and sometimes I have to wait, 15, 20 minutes. And finally they'll lay down, they do that deep sigh. And then that's when I'm like, okay, good. Like that's what I'm looking for. And like really calmly reward that behavior. And once I can get started, doing that pretty reliably, I'll introduce like the place command and just giving them opportunities throughout the day just to calm down. And so a lot of the times that will help with like just going on a walk and being frantic there, as well as building engagement. A lot of hand feeding, a lot of, rewarding for eye contact, playing. I wanted to make it so the dog thinks that I'm, the most valuable thing in the world. Like, yes, I could bark at people across the street or I could pull to go do something else. But if I check in with you, that's the ultimate reward. I'm getting the best thing ever from that, not necessarily, what's going on in the environment.
Yeah, so you've got a lot of rescue organizations out there, and part of their puppy socialization includes having those dogs meet basically every dog and person that they come across out in the street. What do you think that builds, and why do you think that's so prevalent out there?
I think a lot of that is us as humans kind of putting our human emotions and what we think a dog wants onto the dog itself. I actually just had a client, brand new puppy owners. Her vet told her to do the same thing. And they sent this detailed report of, let it walk up to strangers, let it walk up to other dogs. So oh, I could go on a tangent on this. Meeting other people, I mean, they might not want to, and you're forcing them to do that, which is stressful and scary for them. And at a young age, I mean, you're kind of setting the precedent that you're not going to advocate for your dog's space or stand up for them. So now they don't trust you. And, they're getting all of these negative experiences. And then for greeting other dogs, I mean, in a big puppy play pit, it's one thing, but on leash, especially, how much, when we're adding tension on the line and now body language is getting misconstrued, how often does that lead into a dog fight? And then also, even if they are really social dogs, again, just like Finley, where she, would see something, want to go greet it. Now she's being held back because every other time she's been allowed to. Why can't I this time? And that's why she would start to bark. And a lot of owners, they get so fed up, they're like, fine, go greet them. And now you're rewarding that behavior.
Yeah, so socialization, I mean, to you, I mean, we know what the large rescue organizations are preaching and telling them to do, but to you, what does it truly mean?
For me, it's more so just exposure. Can we have really happy, neutral, just going out and seeing the world? For all my puppy clients, I'll take them places. I want you to see the man in the hat. I want you to see someone in a wheelchair. I want you to see a big dog, a little dog, the yappy dog. but I don't necessarily need you to go greet them or have any big feelings about them. I just need you to see it. Okay, like that happened. You check in with me. Great. Wow, super fun. There's going to be things that they encounter that maybe as a puppy they didn't see. And then, dogs get a little weird about that. Like the trash can on the wheels and, you're pushing it out to the curb. Some dogs are like, whoa, what is that? Just keep it moving. Just walk on by, keep it neutral. Not everything has to be like, go sniff it, go, interact with it. I think a lot of, what people think is socialization is just forced exposure. And that's where dogs just, don't have a good time.
Sure. And then just to piggyback off that, what are the behaviors or what are humans doing to make the problem worse?
Oh gosh. One thing is, I tell my clients, okay, so your dog gets scared of something, and you immediately go down and you pick them up or you're coddling them. Oh, it's okay, it's a good boy, it's fine. And at the time, okay, so when your dog does something correct and we're rewarding them, they lay down and we're like, wow, good boy, that's so great. They don't know what we're saying. They don't speak English, but they're feeding off of the like, wow, like that's so good. So when we're using that same tone of voice, when we're doing the same, repetitive behaviors of petting or giving a cookie, what are we doing when they're scared? We're rewarding that behavior.
Yeah, you're hitting on a lot of really great points here that I think a lot of dog owners, they have the light bulb moment when you tell them that, right? It's if you allow your dog to do this, they learn in pictures and patterns and repetition. So if you allow your dog to pull at the end of the leash to go meet another dog, and then like you were saying, all of a sudden they can't, well, sometimes means always to them. I was able to before, and why am I not now? And that frustration builds into reactivity, and we see it all of the time. It's really unfortunate, and why we're doing these talks and series is we want to put more education out for owners to understand what appropriate behavior and training really is for both them and the dog in the beginning. So I loved it, just to get back to Finley, because I loved the review. And one really key point that the owners hit on, and we started touching on, that art of doing nothing. I think it almost parallels what's going on in humans' lives, right? We all have our phone. We're always doing something, all overstimulated, all anxious now because of all of the things. And I think dogs are too. So I know you already talked a little bit about like the beginning stages of that art of doing nothing, but is there anything else that you do to build on that and reward that state of mind?
Yeah, I'm really big on keeping like structure and routine in the house, especially with a dog like that. Create time throughout the day. Just go take a nap. Especially with younger dogs, I find a lot of them are exhausted. They're tired. I always equate things back to babies. Like they get fussy and they want to be put down for a nap. But when we're constantly doing, and I mean, it's always well intentioned, but everything is puzzle feeding time. Now we're going to go play fetch, and now you're going to get a Kong, and it get like back to humans. Like you're creating an iPad kid. Outside of that, like they don't know what to do. So yes, now you're going to go spend time on place and practice that. Now you're going to go in your crate, take a nap, and there's not going to be toys in there for you. It doesn't have to be, there's 5 crinkle toys and a Kong and a bed. Just go in there and relax. That's all I need. Practicing threshold manners. That was a big one for her. Sit and wait at the door. And then now we're going to calmly walk to the gate and sit and wait there. Because, especially with dogs that pull or reactive, if they're already busting out of the door, that's setting the tone for the whole walk. Now they're like, okay, I'm ready to go. I'm amped, I'm pulling, and we're just going to keep on going with that momentum. Have them sit, settle, get into the right mindset, check in with you. Okay, now we can calmly start this walk.
It's a really great point. And kind of to go on the other end of the leash, did Finley's owners, I mean, we as humans become patterns too. We know what to expect when we go out on a walk with our dog, and the dog reacts or pulls or does all of the craziness. How were Finley's owners when she came back? Did you see any pattern behavior in them as far as their state of mind at the door? Like, were they anxious? Were they nervous? Any of that? Or have you worked with other clients that you've had to kind of talk through some of that stuff?
So thankfully, Finley's owners, like just right off the bat, nailed it. They were ready for the go home. And that was one of my favorite lessons to do, is because they took criticism so well. A lot of the things that I do notice, not necessarily with Finley, but with other clients that I had, is they don't want to let their dog make mistakes. So especially on walks, their shoulders in their ear and they're choking up on that leash and they're trying to hold their dog in position and not allowing them. And it's like, it's okay if they get ahead of you, that's fine. Now we're going to work through how to get them back into position. We're going to use, the leash correction or the e-collar, reward once they get back in. Like it's okay. Like take a breather. How many times I've had to go through like deep breathing techniques with my clients. I need you to take a deep breath, relax your shoulders. Okay, now we're going to go on a walk. And I think a lot of the times the dogs will start to feed off of the owners. I've gotten dogs where, the owner's like, they're pulling all the time and they're a mess on the leash, but then I get them. But because I'm confident, I'm letting them just, the leash is pretty relaxed. I don't really have issues with them. A lot of the time it's just, they're feeling that constant tension and they're like, what's going on? Like, what are you reacting to?
Yeah, in addition to, some of the misinformation on socialization, you just touched on a couple things. Obviously the hot ticket item is the use of collars, communication tools. The same organizations are saying these are the absolute worst things we could be putting on our dogs with that, in these scenarios. When we use them, how do you use them to basically tell the dog, or how do you use them as a communication tool, and how are they a benefit for anybody who's having dogs that are dragging them down the street, or they're reacting to everything, or just think that the use of an e-collar is cruel? Like, where do you start with that conversation, and then how do you paint that picture as to what it could do for them?
Yeah, I think with tools, I mean, even within the company, I could pick out 5 different Koru trainers and we all might use them a little bit differently. For me personally, I always start by teaching what leash pressure is. Like most of the times the dog I get, like they'll pull through the collar, like they don't care. They don't understand what the leash means because it's never been meaningful to them. So I'll start with a slip leash, kind of let them get to the end of it, use a little tug and encourage them to come back to me. Okay, so now you're starting to understand how to turn that pressure off. Or, I'll teach place with it where, like add a little bit pressure. Oh, you step on it, the pressure's released. Okay, so now we start to understand what I'm asking of you. So from there, some dogs will stay on the slip leash. Some might need a prong collar, but because they still understand what the leash means, how to turn pressure off. Same with the e-collar when we introduce it. I think that's the most fair way to do it. And especially with commands that they already know. There are definitely some companies out there, they'll slap an e-collar on. Dog doesn't know anything, but you're sitting there, sit, 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 turn it up some more, sit, sit, sit. I don't think that's fair. I think any tool really can be misused in the wrong hand. And I think that's why it's important to vet and ask questions with your trainer. How are you specifically going to use this with my dog? But for, any type of like reactivity and stuff, how many times do dogs get tunnel vision and they get that auditory exclusion? They're not listening to you. You can wave a cookie in front of their face the whole time, but that's probably not going to be enough to get their attention back on you. So instead, we can use an e-collar or prong. And I always equate it to, if we're walking down a busy street and I'm holding your hand and then all of a sudden, I either tighten up on it or I tap you on the shoulder, I'm just getting your attention. It doesn't have to be this big dramatic. I'm not grabbing you by the neck and I'm like, listen to me. I'm just getting your attention.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then also, I guess with especially e-collars specifically, it's just an extension of the leash. You have the ability to me, it's a safety tool, right? I mean, when I ask owners, will your dog come back to you when you call them? And they tell me, well, they'll come back 95% of the time. Well, that sounds amazing. But when do you actually need them back? Right? It's that 5% when they're chasing a deer into the road or going after a coyote or something. I mean, those are the type of scenarios that e-collars can be invaluable when they're introduced properly. And again, that's the reason why we are the only ones. We only use tools as needed by the dog, and the dog that usually dictates that level of control that we have to put on them. And then it has to be just used as an extension of your ability to communicate. And that's really it. I mean, you want every command that you give to be followed. And so your commands don't become suggestions. And I think that's where a lot of people get into trouble. And when it comes to introducing these tools, people going too fast, the do-it-yourselfers out there. And this is why professional dog trainers exist, because we understand the need to read the dog's body language, you'll be able to tell when it's time to progress and when it's not. So, go ahead, Bridget.
Yeah, and then just to build on that with the kind of what we believe is the improper use of the e-collar, for clients out there who may be looking for a dog trainer, you're typically going to find those trainers, the programs are usually cheaper, they're usually shorter, because there is forced compliance there. Where we actually do not offer short programs. We only, our shortest is 3 weeks, and in my mind, it's still too short, but we really want to take the time to teach the dog, as Ashley was saying, and then overlay the tools as a way to communicate what the dog already knows, or have a way to go, hey, like Ashley was saying, just tap them on the shoulder, like pay attention to me still. Ashley, you brought up a really great subject that I'd love to, I'm sure a lot of dog owners don't know that it exists, even though they've experienced it. Auditory exclusion. Could you just define it so people know what it is?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's just all their senses are so overwhelmed with, that tunnel vision. They're so hyper focused on that one thing, whether it's a dog across the street, a squirrel, a bunny. You just kind of become that muffled background noise where you're like, hey, like, come here, and all they're hearing is doo, 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 doo. But they don't care. Like, they're focused on that one thing. It shuts off. So you need to get through them with tactile stimulation. It's the same thing, if I tap on the e-collar or if I tug on the leash a little bit. Like Ray was saying, like, it is just an extension of the leash. Just, hey, what are you doing? Knock it off. Get back over here.
Yeah, you get a lot of this when we start talking about genetics. When you've got somebody who's got some, Shih Tzu who doesn't like to get off the couch, and then you've got somebody who's got a Belgian Malinois, and they see a squirrel walk by, the Malinois gone. He's chasing, he's running, he's doing what instinctually he was told to do by, genetics. And the only way to get him to knock it off is to break that focus and that target lock, basically, with like, hey, come back here. That sensation means stop what you're doing, come back to me. I've felt this before, I understand it. That's why, people ask that question a lot, that, why does, Rusty the golden retriever across the street walk on a harness and on a flexi lead and do all this stuff, and my dog needs all these collars on his neck? How do you explain that to people?
I explain it. It's every dog is different. Every dog is going to need different tools. And going back to the whole, like how to properly vet a trainer. If you look on their Instagram account and every single dog gets a prong collar and e-collar combo, maybe do some questioning about their methods. Some dogs I'll send home like, okay, yeah, like a regular flat collar or slip leash, like that's totally fine. And then also, some dogs, they might be on a harness and a flexi combo because their owners just don't know better. And maybe that looks fine in that moment, but the dog's going to go down the road, half a mile and start freaking out on something else. You don't know where anyone is on their training journey. So I tell people, don't compare your dog to other dogs. Your dog isn't that dog. You don't know what they're working with. They don't know what you're working with.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And I think it's really difficult for owners. I mean, everyone's, I don't want to say they're worried about what other people think in a negative way, but it is difficult, when they're out there and if their dog's misbehaving and they see other people, it's challenging for sure. Actually, on the note of people again, with Finley, the owners sound amazing. I would love to meet them actually and have them on here if they'd ever be open to it. What did they do while Finley was with you? I know they were on vacation, but if they were home at all, did they have any time to do any prep work? Or on the flip side, when Finley came back home, what kind of homework did you give them initially? And, just to talk a little bit about the process with them.
Yeah, I think one thing that really sets, a client that is seriously invested in their dog training versus one that just like, okay, like they're off at boot camp. They were very engaged the entire time. So every update email, if they had questions, they would ask it. If not, they'd, be like, oh, wow, like I can see she's making progress. So, sometimes there's a little bit of disconnect between the clients and us as trainers of being like, okay, like, are you actually reading the emails? Are you watching the training videos? So it's always nice when they fill us in, be like, wow, like I saw that video and like, that looks great. And then like, I always tell them like, my time is your time. So during the go home lesson, they already had everything set up, which is great. Sometimes, you go to the lesson and you're like, okay, like, did you buy everything I told you to? And they're like, it's on the way. And I'm like, okay, well, we can borrow my tools for now, but like hopefully they get here soon. Um, they were really great about, taking the lead. Sometimes people, they're like, oh, well, like, can you just show me? And they're like, okay, like, I understand. And they don't want to demonstrate. I think it's a little bit of just being shy, which me too. I don't want to demonstrate in front of people. So I understand that. But they were really good about taking the leash and be like, is this correct? Like, what can I do to modify this? Very open to criticism, and just wanted to make sure that they were doing everything correct on their part. And they were really good about like thinking ahead of like, okay, like she's doing this because you're here. What happens if you leave and then X, Y, and Z behavior happens? And it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, like we can go over if that does happen, do this. If that doesn't work, try this. If not, call me. Um, so that's something that I really like in the go home lessons is, taking charge, ask questions, anything you're confused about. Don't try and figure it out on your own. Like that's why I'm here. That's why you paid me money.
It's such a good point. And I think, again, for any dog owner out there watching this or listening to this, eh, even if you feel silly or, dumb or any of that, nobody's judging you. None of us are judging you. In fact, we want you to make mistakes. That's where the learning happens. And if you feel that way, at the end of the day, this is about your dog. So we want to put all those feelings aside and, actually get the owners out of their comfort zone, because I think that's truly where the relationship between the dog and the owner is going to flourish when they're both kind of in the same spot. They're both learning together, and they're both kind of overcoming different obstacles that they have together. So I love that Finley's owners were that proactive and engaged. The engagement part, that makes me think there's some more stuff that I'd like to do to kind of prompt owners to communicate while we have their dogs. To kind of build on this, given how engaged they were, is there anything that maybe you would recommend that they do from here on out? Or what do you think, maybe 6 to 12 months of training post board and train for Finley would look like?
Finley was a pretty solid dog. I think for them specifically, it's the inclusion of the other dog in the household, who's a little bit older, definitely a different set of problems, not problems, but, behavioral issues. He's a little bit more anxious of a dog, paces the house, like doesn't really want to settle, whereas she just will naturally be like, okay, like this is fine. So sometimes, when I did the follow-up lesson, Finley would go do something and then she would see the other dog like kind of meandering about and she's like, why does he get to go do whatever? Or, like the doorbell would ring and she would default to go laying on place, but then he would want to bark and she's like, can I bark? So a lot of their homework and what I'm expecting of them, 6, 12 months after this program isn't more so on Finley. It's more so kind of getting the other dog in the same place. And we included him in all of the lessons too. So everything that Finley learned with me, now they're now working on with their other dog, to kind of get them both pretty even keel. So that way that she's not feeding off of his behaviors, and hopefully in turn, then he can start feeding off of her calmness and be like, okay, like we can all just chill out in the house.
That's another really good point. Multi-dog households and consistency across training with both of them, because I think it's really common where we'll get kind of the problem child of the two, but then there's still the dog at home. Is there any specific homework you gave them for the other dog at all, or it seems like they're probably pretty rock solid to kind of just practice through the stuff on their own?
So he wasn't crate trained, and like kind of got away with it for a while. And I think that's where a lot of the constant stimulation, he wanders about the house, he looks out the window and barks at people that walk by on the street. So he never is able to really turn his brain off. So, we started with introducing the crate and introducing the place command. And he's pretty interesting because I watched him get on one and he didn't like the texture of it. So he would get super scared on it. And that's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to he's not going to relax there if he's scared. But we threw a blanket on it and he's like, oh, actually, I like this, like real sensitive dog. Whereas Finley, like out rolling in the mud, out backpacking, in the Alpines, and she's fine. Whereas he's just like, I need some comfort in my life. But it was good for them to kind of see the difference in them. and how to kind of navigate what to do with a more sensitive dog. It's not fair to force him into situations he's uncomfortable with. How can we make it more comfortable for him?
For sure. Were they even aware of the anxiety and whatnot in their other dog before they sent Finley away, or did it like really pop once Finley came back and was really well trained? Did it kind of like highlight it more for them?
I think they were aware of it, but it was manageable. But then when Finley came home and they're like, oh, like this is what it could look like for the both of them, I think that's what kind of was like, okay, we should start asking more questions about him versus Finley. We actually, our follow-up lesson was pushed out well over a month. I mean, we stayed in constant contact. She would text me, the owner would text me all the time about questions or, how Finley's just doing. They introduced a cat, like they brought home a cat and they're like, Finley's doing great with her. Because I have two cats and Finley played with them the whole time she was here. But then when we finally did do the follow-up lesson, they're like, sorry, like we didn't really want to schedule anything because she was doing so well. We were kind of just hoping at some point something regressed and we can work on it. But that never really happened. And I was like, well, I'm glad to hear that, but like, let's do something in here, get your money's worth. So we focused on the other dog and they're like, Finley knows place. So we bought him the same cot, but he just won't go on it. And the same thing where like, we're constantly wandering throughout the house and he's following right behind us. And now we're realizing like that's probably not healthy for him. And I'm like, no.
Okay, so I have 5 cats, so of course I pick up on the fact that that they brought a cat home, which I love. Did you work with them at all on how to properly introduce the cat into their home? And if not, maybe offer up a few tips or tricks for people who may want to be introducing another animal, specifically a cat, which is a nice little prey item for many dogs. What are some tips that you would give owners who want to introduce another animal?
Having the impulse control is going to be the biggest one. So they didn't reach out to me until after the fact, but I think they kind of knew, a general baseline. So they would have Finley on place and like let her kind of see him wandering around. I think the other dog, they were like, okay, it's gonna be a really slow introduction with him, just because they don't have such a level of control. But anytime, introducing cats, it's very controlled. There are some dogs that just don't care. But then other dogs, like you said, like it is a little prey item. And when cats get scared, they run and they jump around. That's, a prime opportunity for a dog to want to just lunge after it and try and grab it. So I'll even recommend like have the leash on your dog. There's no shame in having a leash on your dog inside of the house. Like if that's gonna, create that element of control and like just kind of like rein them in a little bit, keeps everyone safe.
100%. I mean, full disclosure, when we got this, we rescued a tiny little, 10-ounce kitten a couple years ago, and our dog Voodoo was on a leash because he's our little enthusiastic one. So we had to keep him on a leash for a while, just to show him a little bit of control too. Let's see. I wanted to ask you one other question here. Oh, the distraction comment that they had in their review. I thought that was really great. How they talked about how Finley was able to now listen through distraction. And we've been kind of hinting about this. What are some of the things that you did with Finley to help her succeed when there was high distraction?
I always just start super low. So I'll put my dog on place in the backyard and he's a little dodo brain. So he'll just sit there all day and be like, oh, like, what's going on? Like he never even really pays attention to the other dogs, which I think makes it easy for them to see. And I mean, he's a big boy. He's like 85 pounds. So like you're not missing his presence at all. So having dogs being able to heel around him or lay on place and they see him, but nothing's happening and they're like, oh, okay. And so it's easier to like have them check in on me with that. And then, okay, so now we kind of up the ante a little. Now you're on place and I'm playing with him or I'm having him bark on command. Again, still really controlled because once I get out into the neighborhood or we're going, on a nature walk, I can't control what other people and their dogs are going to do. So I try to, in a very controlled environment, make it as stimulating as possible. And then from there we can move on. And then it's just walks throughout the neighborhood when I know people might be at work or, really low traffic and then building our way up to there.
This has been great. I mean, you've touched on so many things like we didn't even think we were going to talk about today, but it just led there, which is awesome. I do want to bring up one other thing. You know, we are very selective on the trainers that we work with, and as a company, we truly do care about how these owners, you know, change their lives. You know, basically to learn how to communicate with their dogs and stuff like that. What would you recommend first-time dog owners, never had one? You know, what kind of questions should they be asking prospective dog trainers, you know, before they trust their dogs to go away? I know you brought up one about, you know, check out their Instagram, and if they're covered with collars, let's ask some questions. And then, you know, I guess duration is also another, duration of their programs is probably another flag. But if there's other things that you can think of, what else would you ask um, a prospective company before you send your dog away for training?
Yeah, oh gosh, a lot really. One of the big things for me when I was just, a novice dog owner and I didn't really understand dog training at all. I was going to be a nurse, by the way. Like that was my career path. So I was in nursing school. When I was looking at dog trainers, it was, why do you do this? And now, like as a trainer myself, like I understand that it is a lucrative career path. So if you're only in it for the money, you're probably also not pumping out good results either. How many dogs are you taking at a time? How many personal dogs do you have? If you own 10 personal dogs and then you're taking 10 client dogs, how often are they really going to be getting out? Is this facility based or is it home based? That's one of the things that I really enjoy about working with Koru is I work from my home, so I can simulate home environment situations. Your dog counter surfs, your dog barks through the window. We can all do that in my house. That behavior really isn't going to change here if I have a juicy steak sitting on my counter. For a facility, I mean, there's benefits to that too, but it's a little bit of a more sterile environment. Um, what are safety protocols that you have? That was one thing when I first started with Koru and I worked in the office is that stood out right away is that we have safety protocols for everything. There's cameras monitoring 24/7 on everything. Temperature gauges, both in the rooms that the dogs are in the vehicles. What is your evacuation plan if an emergency happens? If, a hurricane or a tornado comes through, what are you doing with the dogs? These are all things that I, as a pet owner, and I am a little neurotic when it comes to my dog, that I would want to know. How do I know my dog is going to be safe with you? Things happen, but it's okay if an accident happens. It's just how are you going to respond to it after the fact?
Awesome. That's awesome. I mean, and we've been asking everybody the whys. You know, why did you get into dog training? You know, because Damien brought that up. You know, the first one of these we had, but you already alluded to it a little bit about your dog. You said was terrible. But, are there any other things you can elaborate on besides just that dog? Why else? Why else are you into dog training? I mean, what? I mean, obviously that was a big piece of it, but is there anything else that you would like to add to that?
Yeah, so it started with her. That was really my big introduction to like ethical breeding and genetics and how to select the right dog for you. Because really, I mean, she didn't have severe behavioral issues. Like she wasn't aggressive or anything like that. Terrible recall. Again, like wasn't really fitting into my lifestyle because I wanted the cuddly golden retriever, but I got a Shiba instead. So kind of like figuring all of that out. And once we kind of got some basic control over her, definitely not a dog that could ever be off leash, like even with an e-collar. Awful, awful dog. But like just realizing like how nice it was on the tail end to have a trained dog. That was kind of my introduction. And then I got into service dogs, not necessarily on the training side, but because I needed one. I needed a medical alert and response dog. And then that gave me a lot of independence as a person who is disabled, being able to go out there. My husband's in the military, so he was deployed a lot. Um, if I pass out in public, I didn't have anyone there to help me, but now I have a dog that can help me. So that, you know, building up to how I eventually went off to Tar Heel. Then I went to Tar Heel, bought my dog from Jerry, who complete jerk. This was my introduction to behavior modification. He was the dog that no one wanted to handle. My really good friend was the kennel tech there, and she told me about every time she had to take him out to potty, he was in like a heavy duty metal crate, and she would push it all the way to the door to let him out because she refused to walk him. She was scared of him. And I don't blame her because he was a little scary when I bought him. I initially was just fostering him, and once I kind of got him out of that kennel environment and started to see who he really was when he wasn't so like over threshold, I fell in love with him, and we've been an inseparable pair ever since. But I mean, he was a dog that he wasn't afraid to put his teeth on people. And I don't like to tell clients this because, he's in the background of every one of my videos. And I'm like, I promise he's safe. He's social now. But in the beginning, he was a jerk. If he didn't want to do anything, he'd be like, either you make me, and if you make me, then I'm going to bite you. And so it was a lot of learning how to read body language. What are your boundaries? And how do we kind of work through it? So like, if you don't like your feet being touched, that's fine. I still need to trim your nails. So how do we find the balance in between there? How do we build a relationship that you feel comfortable with me doing that? So then having, a dog that didn't listen, that was stressful. And then now having a dog that is aggressive and could be a liability. Like, how do you manage that? And then realizing, like, again, what it's like on the tail end, those breakthroughs, like that's just the feeling that I want to put on to other people.
Selfishly, I love that so much because that is why Koru K9 exists 100%. That is why we started this company. We had the same, Luna wasn't quite, well, yeah, I take it back. She did enjoy putting some teeth on some people from time to time. But yeah, just that feeling, like I never will forget the first time I had a successful walk with her. It's incredible. And yeah, we want to give that back to all of our clients. And so on that note, Ashley, this was great. I think we touched on a lot. There's a lot that we touched on that I actually want to do another talk with you if you would be open to that, because there was a lot of great information. But for everybody out there, please make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel because we will be putting out a lot more of these trainer talks and education and information for you. You can follow us on Koru K9, our website, koru-k9.com, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Koru K9, LinkedIn as well if you're on there. And that is all